welcome to the Heroes of Cosplay Sanctuary. This is your host, Scotty B. One thing that I really wanted to talk about, because I don't know if I have before. I do know if I have before. I have mentioned it, but I haven't really gotten into the subject of talking on novels and books. Like, I think, I had one guest. Shelly was a guest a long time ago, and she has some of the most amazing posts that you will ever see on Instagram. Check these out. I will again try and link as I'm going through all of the editing. Make sure that we get the links in the description below to all of the things that I talk about on the episode. But the space that she sometimes jumps to, because she is a writer, she's an award-winning writer herself, that you want to find some things that are actually written and not just on television or in the mainstream space that most people go to when they are creating their cosplays. The thing about books is it's a really cool place to take maybe the same character that you've seen in your Game of Thrones space or in your Lord of the Rings space, but also so many characters, indie characters, just different things. Yeah, nobody's maybe, and this will get into some obscure cosplay comments that we will talk about later in later episodes, but the cosplay that we're talking about is, from a novel. Then there's a lot of reference material and description, but there aren't a lot of pictures, so you have a lot of imagination. I think that I would classify a book cosplay, something that you're finding in a novel or a short story, or maybe even an anime of some kind, like if you're reading manga, that manga has more pictures obviously, but that you're taking it from source material that's more just written. You're reading something and you're getting a feel for what you believe this character should look like. You might get some description on color or style, things like that. And of course, if you can get the period of when this is taking place, it's much more, I think, for fantasy, to get fantasy characters like this, because there's more interpretation and it could be a lot of fun and you can get a lot of satisfaction out of doing this. But I think it is more of an advanced thing. So there's no visual cues, so you have to have these skills. You have to be able to conceptualize and say, okay, well, I can create all of these things, I can sew these things. It's a lot of sewing. I think these are much better when you are competing, because there's so many skills that are required to possibly pull something like this off. You have to do so much of it yourself. You can't really, you could outsource it, but then you're not competing. But if you want to get into a competitive cosplay space and like join up with these things and go to the competitions and be judged, that the novel, as obscure as they may be, some of them aren't, but if you're taking concept and you're building a character out of that, that is a really cool and fun space to be for competition. And that showcases your skill level as a cosplayer, that you're weathering and you're sewing and you're putting all these details into every single thing. You're not just wearing a jumpsuit and doing some foam and slapping it together and going to the con and having some fun. This is like, okay, I'm going to design something and it's going to be like out of my head from this author, and it's totally interpretive, but it's going to be a lot of fun. You can't outsource a lot. It is going to be ultra customized, and if you're making it, it's going to be unique to the reader's perspective. So people aren't necessarily going to recognize what it is you're actually making, because their version of what you're doing, you could have the same character in completely different looks. So they may not even recognize you, even if they are fans of whatever novels or fantasy books or anything that you happen to be reading, that they're looking at that and going, it looks like that, but I'm not sure if it's exactly the same. So maybe I'll ask. I think you can get a lot of buzz at a con when you do stuff like that. Like, people show up in these just amazing, elaborate cosplays, and you're not quite sure about the characters. You ask them, they have like a huge story, like, oh, it comes from this book, and I know this author is amazing and writes just vivid, and that just, wow, like I see these all the time. It's just amazing amount of like, just the level of skill that goes into some of these is amazing. That comes out of sci-fi and fantasy, and just all the different props you can do. And it's really a challenge. So I would say, if you're a beginner, maybe not. Maybe this isn't a good place to start unless you already have the skills as a seamstress or a tailor, and this is just like, oh, I'm just going here and I'm going to do this. Like, no problem. The skills that you will build doing these, though, the design, the conceptualization, this foaming and the sewing, just little crafty things that go on inside of this, because you don't have to make something screen accurate when you're doing something out of a novel. That's a lot of the fun of it, is it can be all yours. You don't have to look at the picture and go, well, that's not screen accurate. No, that's not what it looked like in the movie. You also have to remember that you are not a movie. You don't have a movie budget. Okay. You don't have like a crew of people that are working around the clock and building just costume after costume after costume, and that's all they do, and they get paid pretty well to do it. Like, it's a paid thing. Like, this is something you do in your free time, and they're just skill sets that you're building. Like, try not to set the bar so high that you get discouraged about all the work that you're putting into something that would go into a cosplay from a book or a novel. That is all I want to say today. Just a really interesting concept, and again, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the show. Follow us online. Of course, it's always in the description. New content's coming out all the time, folks. This is always going to be a safe space for you to share your stories, tips, builds, and those causes that we should be made aware of in the community in cosplay. This is Scotty B with Heroes of Cosplay Sanctuary saying bye-bye, everybody.